everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the ANA e-Learning Academy. We are very excited for this opportunity to come together at a time when we are all so far apart. I'd like to give a special thank you to our presenter that has put in many hours to make this happen in such a short time. As you may have seen, we have added many new e-learning opportunities to our website, money.org. If you have not checked out our website in the last month or so, I recommend jumping on to see the other new presentations we have added, as well as our upcoming schedule. During this presentation, you may come up with questions. If you do, please use the chat or Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to send in your question, as all of our attendees are muted during this presentation. Your question will come to me, and I will share the questions with our presenter at the end. If, at the end of the presentation, we're unable to get to all of the questions, I will send them to our presenter to answer, and hopefully he will get back to you in a relatively decent amount of time. So toward the end of this presentation, I will be sending out a survey using the poll feature here in Zoom. Please answer each question honestly so that we can improve our presentations. The surveys will be shared anonymously with the presenter so that they too can improve if needed. Mike's pretty good though, so I don't know if we can improve upon this. But folks, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter for the day, Michael E. Marotta. He's going to be giving a talk titled Pay Warrants of the Texian Navy. Now, we all remember the Alamo, but the Navy was the savior of the Republic of Texas. Printed on orders from Commodore Edwin Moore, the pay warrants of the Texian Navy were repudiated by President Sam Houston. They may hold a cue to the mutiny aboard the San Antonio. Now, a little something about our presenter before we let him begin. Michael E. Marotta was granted 2 Heath Literary Awards in 1996 and 2002 for his research into the origins of coinage and Sir Isaac Newton's 30-year tenure as Warden and Master of the British Royal Mint. He served on 2 ANA Future of the Hobby committees in 2001 and 2002. From 2005 to 2011, he wrote the Numismatics Monthly Internet Connections column. In 2010, he was granted an ANA Presidential Award by President William H. Wharton Jr. He has written feature articles for the Numismatist on topics such as proof double eagles, coronet cents, the 20-cent series, peace dollars, and walking liberty half dollars. In 2019, he spoke at the Sunman Lecture Series on the future of numismatics. He is also a member of the Michigan State Numismatic Society, the Texas Numismatic Association, and the Numismatic Bibliomania Society. So without further ado, Michael, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. And thank you all for being here, for making the time to view and listen. I will post my contact information again at the end of the presentation. Every artifact speaks to those who know how to listen. Careful historians who themselves lived only in an industrialized culture with a mature monetized economy based on an anonymous fiat token system tended not to perceive the full dimensionality of money. We numismatists bring unity across art, science, engineering, history, and sociology to put money into an array of proper contexts. More to the point, we can rotate and translate those arrays to reveal new truths. I'll cut to the chase here. This is about the mutiny aboard the Texian Navy schooner of war, San Antonio. I believe that the numismatic evidence found in the pay warrants of the Texian Navy tell a story somewhat different from the narratives published in half a dozen excellent books. Everyone agrees that the mutineers struck on the evening of February 14, 1842, while docked opposite Slaughterhouse Point at the port of New Orleans. The incident was reported in the New Orleans Picayune and the New Orleans Bee and other newspapers. And by everyone, I mean the authors of academic journal articles starting in 1909 and popular books going back to 1937. However, no one correlated the pay warrants of the Texian Navy to the events of February 11 through 14, 1842. This is a pay warrant for $25. It says, the last naval appropriation being inadequate to satisfy the claims of the officers, sailors, and Marines of the Texian Navy, the holder of this certificate or his assignee will be entitled to $25 upon its presentation at the Treasury out of the first appropriation made by Congress to meet said claims. The note is signed by Samuel B. Shaw, Comptroller, and J.W. Simmons, Treasurer. Of course, the $50 note said $50, and there is a variety known with naval for Navy. The notes were printed 3 to a sheet, 2 25s and 1 50. They were cut apart by hand with scissors. When issued, they were endorsed on the back. This one is signed by John Dazil, a water tender. Understand that many of the sailors were illiterate, and many of these endorsements are in the same hand. They were signed over to the men by the purser or the purser's mate. The notes are not well known today. In fact, before my upcoming publication in the Numismatist this November, the only other mention in the A&A magazine consists of 2 sentences from the November 1931 issue reporting on a meeting of the Dallas Coin Club. I first saw one at a local coin show. It was in a case on the table of dealer Barry Tatum. He was very helpful. Unfortunately, he is not an A&A member dealer, and neither is his firm, the Mike Dunnigan Company. I happen to know something about Texas money because of this volume, Volume 7 in the Whitman series on obsolete paper money by Q. David Bowers. I edited Chapter 8 on Texas. The notes here are all private issues, not Republic of Texas or State of Texas government money. For myself, numismatics is about the historical research, the story behind the object. I'm not an active collector. I received a first-place literary award for an article about the origins of coinage. The next award was for a biography of Sir Isaac Newton's 30-year career as master and warden of the British Royal Mint. So when I saw the first of these 2 notes in Barry Tatum's display case, I asked about it. The price was right. I asked him to have it certified, and while it was out, he found another. I bought that one also and had it sent to the Paper Money Guarantee Company for authentication. I knew from other research that we suspect that many of these paper promises from the early days of Texas were discovered unissued in 1920s and were given historicity with fake signatures. These 2 were authentic, and in fact, it seems that all of the 70 or 80 known examples are original as discovered. So on September 26, 2018, I donated them both to the Brigadier General John C.L. Scribner Texas Military Forces Museum at Camp Mabry, Austin. I did that because my own interest in the notes comes from my service in the Maritime Regiment of the Texas State Guard within the State of Texas Military Department. I came to military service late in life. As a technical writer, I was on a project for the Texas Department of Public Safety Division of Emergency Management. My job was to review, edit, and write contracts for equipment for emergency response. That was how I found out about the Texas State Guard. They staff the Red Cross shelters, carry out swift water rescues, and other deployments. My next job took me to the Texas Military Department Executive Director's Office, where I worked in the information management team. So I volunteered. I was assigned to future operations, where I reviewed, edited, and wrote policies, plans, and procedures for our responses to hurricanes, floods, wildfires, and other disasters. I also became a certified operator and trainer for the Web EOC Common Computer Platform for emergency operations. As the Web EOC operator for the command group and general staff, I was deployed for Hurricane Harvey and other weather events. My last assignment was to be the public affairs officer for the Maritime Regiment, writing news stories for our public-facing websites and Facebook pages. I went out with our underwater dive teams and other rescue operations. When I saw the pay warrant of the Texian Navy in the display case of coin dealer Barry Tatum, I knew that it was an artifact of history. Learning about the mutiny aboard the San Antonio also plucked another resonant string. Although I work as a technical writer in information systems, my college and university degrees are in criminology. My master's degree was granted for research in transnational white-collar crime. And as it happens, the class that intersected the pay warrants of the Texian Navy was a graduate course in wrongful convictions and miscarriages of justice. I began to summarize my findings and placed articles with the Numismatic Bibliomania Society, the Coin Talk Discussion Board, the Texas Numismatic Association, and the ANA. The facts are the same. The telling is different. This presentation, the one you are sharing now, will deliver facts and conclusions that have not appeared in any previous articles. In recent years, the story of the Texian Navy is becoming better known. Still, for most people, even most Texans today, the defeat at the Alamo is the signature event of our war for independence. Our revolution against the centralized military dictatorship of Mexico began with the defeat and massacre at the Alamo. That was followed by the surrender and execution of all of the Texian fighters at the town of Goliad. Panic gripped the government of Texas. We call it the runaway scrape. In fact, it was the Texian Navy that secured our independence. They deprived General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna of ammunition, food, and other supplies. The Texian Navy took the war to him, attacking Mexican shipping, warships, and ports. Even those who know the story of the Texian Navy tend to accept the mutiny aboard the San Antonio as a transient event. In fact, mutiny had been on their minds for months. And 8 weeks later, on May 7th, 1842, the entire officer corps resigned for lack of pay. One supporting reference that I could not include in the magazine articles is my recommendation that you make the time to enjoy this episode of the CBS series JAG. It bears directly on the story of the mutiny aboard the San Antonio. The episode centers on the case of the U.S. Navy brigantine Somers. On December 1st, 1842, Commander Alexander Slidell Mackenzie ordered the execution by hanging of 3 sailors on the charge of mutiny. He'd held no court-martial. The leader of the mutiny was Philip Spencer, the son of the Secretary of War, John Canfield Spencer. Young Philip Spencer was 19 years old at the time. He was accused of instigating the plot to take over the ship, kill the officers and the small fry cadets, and turn to piracy. Although Commander Mackenzie was cleared by a panel of inquiry, he was later charged with murder for the executions. In the JAG story, Marine Corps Lieutenant Major Sarah Mackenzie, played by Catherine Bell, prepares a lecture about the Somers Mutiny for a class at the United States Naval Academy. She imagines the events by picturing her own co-workers in the roles of those in court. It's a good dramatization, and I recommend it highly. On the left is Commander Alexander Slidell Mackenzie. On the right is Midshipman Philip Spencer. These contemporary drawings were the result of the highly charged and highly publicized trial. Among those who wrote about it was James Fenimore Cooper. The case of the Somers bears on the events aboard the San Antonio. The captain of a ship does not have the right to court-martial mutineers. Sailors accused of mutiny are to be held in the brig and tried at the next port of convenience. The court must consist of competent officers. The accused are assured of counsel by the Judge Advocate General. Of course, in 1840, things were a bit different. The navies were as much dependent on flogging as they were on their rations of rum and whiskey. Hundreds or thousands of miles from their home ports, captains could do what they pleased with impunity. That said, though, eventually, captains too could be and were called to account. Now, you may think that the timing seemed problematic in those days just before telegraph, when news traveled by foot. But in fact, as we will see, bad news travels fast. This is the USS Somers. It is a brigantine, a fast two-mast ship designed for pirates and slavers to outrun other military craft. By the 1840s, the militaries of the sea had their own brigs. When I show the next slide, the Texian Navy ship San Antonio, you will see some similarities. One of the important differences is that the Somers was overloaded with 90 men on board a ship designed for 60. This is the San Antonio, a two-masted schooner displacing 170 tons, commissioned August 1839. She carried 6 12-pound guns and 1 long gun firing a 12-pound ball. Nominally, with a crew of 60, I found no records to support that. She was always undermanned. That meant long hours for the crew. Commander was Lieutenant William Seeger. The Commodore of the Texian Navy was Edwin Ward Moore. Moore joined the United States Navy as a midshipman at age 14. 6 or so years later, having served on 4 ships, including duty in the Mediterranean, he was commissioned a lieutenant and posted to the Boston, a 3-masted sloop of war commissioned in 1825. In 1831, she was caught in a hurricane, and Lieutenant Moore was credited with saving her. During the Texas War for Independence in September 1836, off the coast of Louisiana, the Boston captured a Texian privateer. The Terrible was taken to Pensacola, Florida, and charged with piracy. It's a fine point of law, perhaps, but because the ship is more permanent than the crew, it is the ship that is the accused. Be that as it may, historians agree that this contact with the Texians impelled U.S. Navy Lieutenant Edwin Ward Moore to consider his opportunities. 5 years after his last promotion, he was still a lieutenant and serving under senior officers who had sailed during the War of 1812, 25 years earlier. It was not a snap decision. 3 years later, after what must have been some serious and quiet negotiations, on July 8th, 1839, Edwin Moore became the Commodore of the Texian Navy. Moore's exploits saved Texas, but Sam Houston was temperamental and no friend of the Navy. Moore was forced to issue the emergency scrip on his own authority. President Houston repudiated the obligations and eventually ordered Moore to be arrested for piracy and murder. So having read something of the history behind the notes, I started my own investigations. I already was authorized as a researcher with the Henry Ransom Center of the University of Texas, and I signed on with the Dolph Briscoe Center for American History, pictured here. At the Briscoe Center, I found Commodore Moore's published defenses, and thanks to the librarians who knew what the catalogs did not reveal, other original materials. Commodore Edwin Moore wrote his defense in the third person, in the form of a response to an interrogation. From our point of view, that might have been a 19th century affectation, typical of the works of James Fenimore Cooper, or Charles Dickens, or Herman Melville. However, considering that he had been a naval commander accused of piracy by the president of his republic, I found the format appropriate. Commodore Moore published his defense as a booklet. About 500 copies were distributed. The unlawful execution of the mutineers was just one charge among many. And while the Commodore gives a good account of his actions and motives, it is clear from the record, it is clear from the accounting records about the pay warrants that Commodore Moore prevaricated. He ignored orders when he thought that distance from civil authority could allow him to act on his own. The Journal of Midshipman Alfred Walke is one of the very few primary accounts of the Texian Navy. Other researchers obviously relied on it. His clear hand is easy to read. I found it enlightening on several points of naval operations. As an officer, he reported bearings and soundings. However, I also found it to be the most likely source of a common and commonly repeated error about the mutiny found in just about every recent history of the Texian Navy. I also spent about a week at the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. Again, as with the Ransom Center and the Briscoe Center at the University of Texas, I went through a vetting process. Like them, they take just about all of your goods and secure them in a locker. You are given blank paper and pencils. No pens are allowed. You can see the man on the left with his state-issued pink and green paper and state-issued pencil. We are allowed to use our own cell phones as cameras as long as there is no flash. At the State Library and Archives, we can bring our own computers to our assigned workstations. And the image readers and microform readers allow us to download images to our own USB drives. I spent a week, 5 days, about 6 hours a day at the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. I found page after page, book upon book of purser's logs and other financial records of the Texian Navy. Did not take much examination to add up the supplies and tally the names to understand the truly dire situation for the Texian Navy. First of all, there was no money. The Republic of Texas paper money, called redbacks by collectors today, were printed and allocated for other needs of the Republic. The Republic had no hard money. One Treasury report from 1841 lists about $139,000 in assets in the form of Republic notes and $17 in hard silver to back them up. The Republic took its own notes for payment in taxes and import duties. But the logs also reveal the care, consideration, and planning that Commodore Moore invested in his Navy and its men. Everyone was outfitted as best as possible. Also, these logs themselves were purchased by the Navy, printed by the Galveston Daily Courier. Even deeper, using them as a census of the forces under command, it is clear that the Texian Navy simply did not have a full complement of officers, sailors, and Marines. The Austin was a 3-masted sloop of war, a full-rigged corvette displacing 600 tons with 18 24-pound guns and 2 18-pounders. She needed about 100 sailors, Marines, and officers. I found records for about half that many, maybe 60 on the outside. The same is true of the steamship Zavala, the brigantine Wharton, and the schooners San Bernard, San Jacinto, and San Antonio. The Texian Navy needed about 540 to 600 men at any one time and was served by no more than 400 at any one time. At one point, when Commodore Moore ordered the Wharton to meet his flagship, he found the Wharton with a crew of 9. It's the kind of situation that leads to dissension in the ranks. Among the very many ad hoc receipts for supplies were several of these, showing the transfer of pay warrants from Commodore Moore to his purser, Norman Hurd. According to the published histories, soon after these warrants of April 21st were issued, Commodore Moore was ordered in early May to return all of the warrants because they had not been authorized by the Senate or anyone else. Commodore Moore replied that all of the warrants had been distributed to the men of the ships. As we see here, that was not true. It's also not clear exactly how much money was promised. Most of the books say $100,000. However, I tallied all of the surviving notes and interpolated the serial numbers. Neither the notes nor the sheets were numbered sequentially. And I gathered images of all of these receipts from Purser Hurd to Commodore Moore. It looks like only 87,000 Texas dollars. Based on the records, renderings such as these are fanciful. As much as we and the men themselves wish that they looked like this, it is not likely that they did. However, records of the purser from the ship's stores do show a great deal of care and planning. Commodore Moore must have pre-ordered hundreds of flannel shirts, undershirts, duck trousers, leather shoes, black silk neckerchiefs, as well as knives, thimbles, measures of silk tape and silk thread, soap, and all of the other requirements for several hundred men to live at sea for months at a time. And while some of the men were issued hats, others were not, and wove their own. It is possible that officers could have had their own money with which to order their own fine jackets, but it is not likely. The men who signed on were adventurers who had been promised shares of prize money from the sale of seized cargoes. That applied to the ships of the Texian Navy as much as it did to any privateer. In fact, as we will see, the only hard money that came into the treasury of the Republic of Texas was the silver brought by the Navy as their payment from the rebel states of Tabasco and Yucatan. In what author Jim Dan Hill euphemistically called shirt-sleeve diplomacy, Commodore Moore extracted 25,000 Mexican dollars in silver from the town of San Juan Bautista of Yucatan in repayment for keeping the federal Mexican fleet from seizing the rebel harbor. Of that, only $8,000 in silver was delivered to the Treasury of the Republic. The rest went to buy supplies at Galveston and New Orleans and was given out to the men. In addition, sometimes lump sum payments of 8,000 Mexican silver pesos went from the Yucatan or Tabasco rebels to the Texans. And with that, they paid to outfit their ships when they docked at Galveston and New Orleans. Silver, of course, was preferable to paper. This receipt refers to Texas Treasury notes. The meaning is not the government-issued redbacks. Not one of those was given to the Navy. This is for pay warrants, which Commodore Moore offered to any merchant who would accept them. When he had to, Edwin Moore reached into his own purse, bailing out his Navy from his personal savings in gold and silver coins. Sometimes he was able to buy on credit on his own account, the government of Texas being considered less trustworthy. As important as are these archived documents in building a history of the Texian Navy, I can only caution against accepting unqualified eyewitness testimony. As a card-carrying criminologist, I assure you that erroneous eyewitness testimony is common in wrongful convictions. These pages were brought to me by the librarians at the Dolph Briscoe Center for American History at the University of Texas. They are a transcript from a handwritten diary that a family member sought to preserve. I accept it as given. The typist only recorded what they read. However, as everyone sharing this knows, whatever the large gold coin was, no $20 gold pieces existed in 1837. In 1840, most of the handguns of the world looked like these. Most of them were flintlocks. Among them was the occasional percussion cap. The Texian Navy received 180 of these. The newly patented Colt Paterson revolvers fired 5 preloaded metal cartridges. The Texian Navy and the Texas Rangers adopted them before the U.S. Navy made them famous to the wider world. Just to note, the trigger recesses inside the grip and extends when the hammer is pulled back. These revolvers played 2 roles in the mutiny. First, at some point in mid to late 1841, some of the sailors and at least one officer of a Texian ship planned to seize and sell these powerful new handguns to the Mexicans when they plotted to seize and sell their ships to the Mexicans. Secondly, and more tragically, Lieutenant Charles Fuller apparently was shot by a mutineer firing one of these guns. And that brings us to the events of February 11 through 14, 1842. The story is told pretty much the same, embellished a bit for the reader depending upon the insights and assumptions of the various authors. The reports all come from the New Orleans Picayune or the New Orleans Bee or some other secondhand sources. The San Antonio disappeared, presumed lost at sea in the Gulf of Mexico in September or October 1842. An exact date of September 5th, 1842 was also offered in the diary of Lieutenant William Tennyson, quoting a newspaper report. On board were most of the witnesses to the mutiny. Much was reconstructed, not only by later historians, but by Commodore Moore himself as well. As best we know, it played out like this. On February 10th, Lieutenant William Seeger anchored his ship on the right bank of the Mississippi off Slaughterhouse Point. On February 11th, Lieutenant Seeger and First Lieutenant Alfred Waite went ashore for supplies, leaving Lieutenant Charles Fuller in command. Fuller posted Sailing Master M.H. Dearborn as the officer of the deck from 8 p.m. to midnight. On February 14th, sometime before midnight, Fuller met a mob of sailors with Marines in the front, all wanting to go ashore. Fuller ordered the Marines to arms. In other words, he ordered them to take control of the mob. Instead, Marine Sergeant Oswald Seymour attacked Dearborn with a tomahawk. Marine Private Benjamin Pompili shot Lieutenant Charles Fuller square in the chest. Rushing to their aid, Midshipman William Henry Allen was shot in the foot. Midshipman T.H. Odell was shot in the thigh. Marine Private Antonio Landois stabbed Lieutenant Fuller with a cutlass, perhaps bayoneting him. At that point, Boatswain Frederick Shepard intervened, shoving Landois. The wounded officers were dragged below. As Lieutenant Fuller lay dying on deck, the passing mutineers clubbed and stabbed him. The mutineers then took 2 boats and made for shore. New Orleans City Police and United States Marines quickly rounded up the runaways. One question that every author asks, some with more imagination than others, is why was discipline lost? Most authors assume that the men were drunk. Where did the men get the whiskey? Some authors follow each other in claiming that rogue merchants in small boats traded among the sailing ships. In point of fact, the Texian Navy floated on a sea of whiskey. I found 7 receipts between May 14, 1841 and December 6, 1841, totaling 2,527 gallons of whiskey. And then there was this for February 10, 1842 at New Orleans for another short barrel of 37.5 gallons. The full truth is that, unlike this receipt, the whiskey usually was among other purchases for beans, rice, bread, butter, lard, beef, pork, molasses, vinegar, and fresh food as well. Even so, hardly any stores were brought aboard without whiskey. This is Commodore Moore's only statement of the facts as he knew them, and he knew very little. The San Antonio had been lost at sea in the Gulf of Mexico in September or October of 1842. The only witnesses were 2 men, Boatswain Frederick Shepard and Seaman Thomas Rowan, whom Lieutenant Seeger delivered to Commodore Moore aboard the Austin on March 10th, a month after the mutiny. Both men were somewhat compliant. In what must have been a captain's mast hearing and not a court-martial for mutiny, Rowan was given 100 lashes. Shepard was granted a continuance to gather evidence. He eventually was found not guilty of any involvement and was released. Although 4 men were hanged, they were not the only mutineers. For one thing, Marine Sergeant Seymour Oswald escaped from prison in New Orleans and was never recaptured. Marine Corporal Benjamin Pompili died in prison, supposedly giving a deathbed confession and an account of the attack on the officers. Some of the secondhand accounts in books list William Simpson as a Marine. The diary of Midshipman Walke called him a corporal of the Marine, and every researcher has taken that at face value. However, I believe that the evidence of the pay warrants, as well as the muster book, show that he was not. And just to note, there was some variation in the names of the men. The name of James Huggins is variously spelled. Remember, many of these men were illiterate. They spoke their names to the sailing master and purser who entered their names in the books. Sometimes, when you look at a signature, it is likely that this was the only thing that the man could write. In any case, Boatswain Frederick Shepard was found not guilty. Seaman John Williams was given 50 lashes, as was the cook, Edward Keenan. Seaman William Barrington may have received 100 lashes or probably only 50 based on other published recollections. But 2 points need to be underscored. First, these executions were the result of a sham process. It is why President Sam Houston accused Commodore Moore of murder, as in the case of the USS Somers. Second, the hangings of April 26, 1843, which took place aboard the TNS Austin in the Gulf of Mexico, were reported just only 1 week later in the Boston Post for May 3rd, 1843. The prisoners were treated well. The muster book for the Austin shows them issued tin pots and pans for washing, as well as fresh shirts. After being flogged, Seaman Barrington was issued a new shirt, shoes, ticking, a mirror, and $3 in cash. Here is mutineer William Simpson's mark, acknowledging receipt of the tin pot and pan. It's significant, as we'll see. The Journal of Midshipman Alfred Walke tells of the hangings. In his opinion, the men did not expect to be executed. Perhaps they thought that they would be given 100 lashes with the cat. If they were brought up on deck at 12 noon, as indicated, then their hanging at 12:20 p.m. suggests 20 minutes of hard emotions for everyone on deck as the men pleaded for their lives. I believe that the surviving pay warrants endorsed by William Simpson show him to have been the ringleader. While the Marines were out in front of the mob and the Marines shot and killed their naval officers, they acted out a plan put forward by Simpson. He had the social capital, the force of personality to be a central figure among his shipmates. The back of pay warrant number 412 says, "Transfer to Christopher Fox all my right and title to those Navy certificates." It lists numbers 469, 462, 471, 470, 479, 958, 957, 962, and 961. It is endorsed Austin, the name of the ship, William Simpson, boatswain's mate, and witnessed by John Simpson and signed again by William Simpson, without an X as his mark. So who was Christopher Fox? He was a Galveston merchant, born in Ireland in 1811. He emigrated to America in 1836, working for the Jonas Humbert Bakery in New York City before coming to Galveston in 1837. His first bakery was near the harbor. Unfortunately, we do not have the other notes. We have 2 signed by Simpson himself. Who originally endorsed the others may never be known. I believe that the fact that Simpson, a boatswain's mate, held 10 notes, 8 of them originally given to others, is evidence of his being a central figure among the crew. How he obtained the notes is also open to speculation. He may have traded for them, either goods or silver. A better explanation may come from what we know about a different history. In England of the 1780s before the widespread use of merchant tokens, known as British provincial tokens, we call them condor tokens, when small change was in short supply, factory owners would give one man one large silver coin for paying several others, and all of them would go to the tavern together. This may have been something like that. These other men gave Simpson their warrants. He parlayed them to Fox, and everyone split up the bread or whatever else Fox had to offer, though fresh bread alone would have been a treat. We can only speculate. The surviving notes we have that were endorsed by William Simpson are signed by William Simpson, boatswain's mate. The boatswain's mate is a frontline supervisor for maintenance of the ship's exterior. That includes the rigging and the lines, as well as the painting of the decks and hull. The boatswain's mate is a frontline trainer. William Simpson was an experienced sailor to whom other seamen would look for leadership. On the other hand, the Marines were separate from the crew. Their primary duty is defending the ship against boarders. They are also responsible for discipline, using force of arms if necessary to quell the crew. The Marines stand apart. They keep to themselves. And William Simpson was not enrolled among the Marines. This ledger of clothing issued to the Marines from December 1841, just 2 months before the mutiny, does not list Simpson. The fact remains that Simpson was a central figure within the crew. He had social capital, and so I have good reason to suspect him as the true ringleader of the mutiny. However, his execution and the other punishments resulted from sham trials. Some conclusions are easy to establish. Texas owed its independence to the heroic deeds of its two navies. Neither was supported by the central government. The second was completely abandoned by President Sam Houston. The Texas Navy had had 3 paydays. The first was sometime during November 1839, then again sometime in May 1840, and then paid with warrants in May 1841. 8 weeks after the mutiny on the San Antonio, the entire officer corps resigned on May 7th, 1842, for lack of pay. The First Navy fell apart, literally. Of the Second Navy, only the Wharton and the Austin survived the Republic of Texas to join the U.S. Navy. However, the Wharton was condemned immediately, and the Austin soon thereafter. Every artifact speaks to those who know how to listen. Careful historians who themselves lived only in an industrialized culture with a mature monetized economy based on anonymous fiat tokens tend not to perceive the full dimensionality of money. We numismatists bring unity across art, science, engineering, history, and sociology to put money into an array of proper contexts. More to the point, we can rotate and translate those arrays to reveal new truths. Thank you. Sam, back to you.
Thank you, Michael. So I will now be launching a poll, launching a survey for you to fill out. Please complete this survey before you leave the presentation. We greatly appreciate the feedback. It only helps us all get better. The survey is multiple choice, so I hope you choose to take it. It's a multiple choice. If you need to elaborate on one of your answers or have additional comments, please email them to Brianna Victor at seminars@money.org. Again, that's all lowercase, no spaces. Just email anything to seminars@money.org if there are any additional questions or comments on our presentation. I definitely want to thank Mike Marotta for his time. We will have a certificate of appreciation we'll be mailing out to you pretty soon. But before we go any further, let's see if we had any questions. I didn't see anything come through in the Q&A function here. And I did not see any from our webinar chat. So, folks, we do have a couple of minutes here. If you did have questions, oh wait, let's see. I think we may have had not really a question come in. Just someone saying hello to you, Mike. So there's that. Hopefully, hopefully we'll have some come up here. I was hoping we'd have a few more during the presentation.
How many people attended?
From what I could tell, at the height, I noticed 23.
Okay, that's great.
Not too bad. Yeah, exactly.
I seldom get, the money talks have always been thin. We've talked about that.
Yeah, exactly. It's always difficult during the day too.
Sure. Yeah.
So that is always tough, and it's not like
Always happy to have an audience.
Show. So
I will, as I said, Sam, I'll turn all the slides into a PDF, and I'll give you my cleaned up notes as a PDF, because the notes are keyed to the slides.
Yeah,
so you can make those both available.
That would be great to have. Yeah, because we will have this in our archives for people to see. So that would be wonderful. We can include all that. So let's see, one person. Yeah, definitely. Thanks to our speaker. I was impressed with the receipt for whiskey signed by Lieutenant Seeger on the San Antonio. Huh. And also, the same person said it was interesting that the receipt was signed before the attack.
Little did he know.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Okay. Well, thanks again. Thanks, Sam, and pass that on to Brianna. Thanks to the audience.
Yeah.
Oh, you got something?
So, yeah, let's see. Michael Nebruge says, "Are you familiar with my book, The Paper Republic?"
I'd have to check my bibliography.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's all right. Hang on. I mean, I don't want. I can do a few things here. Wait a minute.
Sure.
Can't do that. Can you minimize me or something? Can you take control away? Stop sharing. I can do that. That's okay.
Yeah, if you hit stop share, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Hang on. Because I did. I have James Bevel's Paper Republic, Struggle for Money and Credit.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I have to keep digging. There's always something more to be read. I'm looking forward to it. Email me that reference, and I'll add it to what I've got.
Okay. So one other question just came in and said, are any shipwrecks of the Texian Navy found?
No, to my knowledge, no.
Let's see. And gentleman Michael N says, yeah, he hopes you enjoy that work, that book, the Paper Republic.
So there's my bibliography.
All right. Nice. Okay, Mike. Well, it looks like we may not have any other questions here, but again, I definitely want to thank you for your time. And like I said, we will be mailing you out a certificate of appreciation shortly. This is usually where I'd be giving you a handshake and the certificate, but unfortunately, distance does not allow for that.
I'll move your hand up to the.
Oh yeah, there you
go.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Of course. So guys, please join us for our next presentation, Strategies to Dispose of Your Collection by ANA Education Director Rod Gillis.
Okay.
This is happening on Friday the 7th at noon Mountain Daylight Time. If you'd like to register for the next presentation, please visit info.money.org/elearning to do so. Easier, just go to the ANA website, money.org. It's on the home screen. It's on the slider. You'll find it. It's a lot easier that way. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time at the ANA's e-Learning Academy. Thanks again, Michael. Really appreciate
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.